The subcommittee is now in order. Welcome everyone to our hearing of the United States Senate Space and Science Subcommittee. Thank you to each of our witnesses for their participation today.
The FAA should not be more regulated. That's the message from multiple space companies Wednesday testifying during a hearing entitled Promoting Safety, Innovation, and Competitiveness in U.S. Commercial Human Space Activities. In simpler terms, companies like SpaceX and Blue Origin took to the stand to confirm the FAA being short-staffed is becoming a major issue for innovation and continued growth of commercial spaceflight.
I'm now going to introduce our witnesses for today's hearing. Our first witness is Karen Shinark. Ms. Shinark is the president of CS Consulting and an adjunct space law professor at Georgetown University Law Center. She was formerly the vice president for government affairs at Relativity Space and spent 10 years at SpaceX. You are recognized for your opening statement.
Thank you for inviting me to share my perspective on the U.S. commercial space industry. I am honored to appear before the committee in my personal capacity, and I'm not representing any company or client's views. My testimony is focused on a few key points regarding U.S. space law and policy governing private space activities. I hope to convey that space is highly regulated and that maintaining America's competitive edge in space is increasingly dependent on improving and streamlining existing regulatory processes. It also depends on our ability to develop an efficient and effective approach to authorizing exciting new or so-called novel space activities. My first point, the U.S. space industry is highly regulated and encompasses a diverse range of activities with different levels of maturity and customers. As such, it operates in accordance with a multitude of local, state, and federal laws, and depending on where companies operate, they may also be subject to foreign laws. U.S. space companies are licensed based on their primary activities, launch, reentry, remote sensing, and telecommunications, by the FAA, NOAA, and FCC, respectively. That said, each of those activities may also require licenses from one or both of the non-primary agencies. Importantly, we do not have a one-stop shop approach to licensing space activities. Second, launch and reentry companies are subject to U.S. law no matter where they operate, and an efficient approach to regulating them is crucial to their success. Such jurisdiction was established in the 1994 Commercial Space Launch Act and conforms to the United States' international treaty obligations. The primary focus of the CSLA-based licensing regulations and review for launch and reentry is public safety, which requires the FAA to review the design, operation, and testing of a vehicle's flight safety system, as well as aspects like vehicle hazards, including debris, toxic release, and overpressure. As outlined in my written statement, obtaining a launch or reentry license is an extensive multi-year effort. Recent changes to the FAA's regulations have not resulted in streamlined licensing reviews. Instead, Part 450 has proven more cumbersome and costly. To date, only 4 licenses have been issued under Part 450, and at least 2 of those exceeded the FAA's 180-day statutory timeline. With respect to human spaceflight, the learning period or moratorium does not limit all regulatory oversight. For example, the FAA regulates to protect crew members because they are part of a vehicle's flight safety system, which falls within FAA's public safety authority. There are regulations regarding spaceflight participants as well, including their training and their acceptance of risk. Given the limited number of private human spaceflights, 3 orbital and 10 suborbital, the ongoing opportunities for thoughtful engagement between the FAA and industry, as well as the FAA's challenges with implementing its existing regulations, the original premise underpinning the learning period still appears solid.
SpaceX, Blue Origin, and Virgin Galactic executives urged senators to improve the FAA. We got to hear from a SpaceX VP Bill Gerstenmaier, who emphasized the FAA's commercial space office needs at least twice the resources that they have today for licensing rocket launches.
This is a critically important hearing. We're at an inflection point with incredible innovation in commercial space launch. The criticality is especially true in the face of strategic competition from state actors like China. SpaceX is under contract with NASA to use Starship to land American astronauts on the moon before China does. We are undertaking a campaign that requires many early test flights to rapidly mature and prove out the critical systems needed to safely land NASA astronauts on the lunar surface. We understand the vital importance of this national mission and the absolute need to protect the public during every phase of development. Starship has been ready for its next flight test for more than a month, but we are waiting for an FAA license and accompanying interagency review. The Office of Commercial Space Transportation, known as AST, must recognize where the industry is, where the industry is going, and its role in regulating this emerging industry. Promote, encourage, enable, and protect public safety. This was Congress's direction to the Commercial Space Act when it was written. To do this, the pace of American regulation must match the pace of American innovation. We are falling behind. I'm privileged to lead a team of outstanding safety and reliability engineers at SpaceX. I also serve in the control room as SpaceX's chief engineer for 3 private Dragon flights with spaceflight participants. Safety and reliability are everyone's responsibility at SpaceX and enables our current flight rate at about 1 launch every 4 days. Safety and reliability enable flight rate and do not inhibit. Regulations, likewise, can also be an enabler. As it relates to the topic of this hearing, I want to be clear that Congress should pass a multi-year extension for the human spaceflight learning period. Human spaceflight represents a tiny fraction of all space launches and is properly regulated today under a responsible and balanced framework given the nascent state of the industry. Much work is being done to think through what the future regulation may look like. We must get this right, and it will take time. It would be premature by several years to let the learning period lapse, so I call on Congress to extend it. With that said, I want to focus my testimony on AST's regulatory framework for launch and reentry licensing, which is in great distress. I want to state clearly that AST is an outstanding and important organization that needs more resources and immediate regulatory direction from Congress. AST's role is critical to enabling safe space transportation, but we're at a breaking point. AST has neither the resources nor the flexibility to implement its regulatory obligations. Licensing, including environmental approval, often takes longer than rocket development. This should never happen, and it's only getting worse. Our Starship, Falcon, and Dragon programs are encountering regulatory headwinds and unnecessary bureaucracy that has nothing to do with public safety. Regulation is important, but so are the technical challenges associated with developing and operating transformative vehicle systems like Starship. In my written statement, I offer several specific proposals for the committee's consideration. As a summary, first, the AST licensing division needs at least twice the resources that they have today. We also recommend expedited hiring authority for AST to onboard additional qualified technical experts with an innovative mindset or to bring in outside help. Second, AST's role is to protect public safety, not to ensure success of rocket launches. Congress has been very clear about this. Space is not aviation. In space launch, as long as failure occurs safely, safe failure and rapid learning are often the fastest path to successful development. Third, AST's Part 450 regulations need to change. When it comes to projects of national interest, such as the Artemis program, Congress should establish a regulatory regime consistent with the national program objectives and schedules. Other government agencies that participate in AST licensing, like those with environmental responsibilities, should also be required to complete their work consistent with the national program schedules.
We also heard from Phil Joyce, who is Blue Origin's Senior Vice President of New Shepard. He agrees that the FAA is struggling to keep pace with the industry.
Blue Origin's team is focused on radically reducing the cost of access to space, harnessing its vast resources and inspiring future generations. We build and operate reusable rocket engines and launch vehicles, in-space systems, and lunar landers. The products we create will enable our vision of millions of people living and working in space for the benefit of Earth, a vision that must be built on a foundation of safety, innovation, and competition. At Blue Origin, we recognize that the United States government is a critical partner in advancing our vision. On July 20th, 2021, our New Shepard suborbital rocket completed its first commercial human spaceflight. safely carrying 4 humans above the Kármán line and back to Earth. This milestone was made possible by a deliberate step-by-step test and verification program conducted over many years with a singular focus on safety. Since then, New Shepard has flown 5% of the world's population of astronauts above the Kármán line and almost 9% of the women, and many firsts for humans in space. Our astronauts return to Earth forever transformed by their experience and share this with the rest of the world to inspire positive change. Since the dawn of the space age, humans in space have united the planet, and there is no time like the present to remind us how critical this is for humanity. The first step to an enduring human presence in space is launch. The FAA's authority in this area is clear and its regulatory powers are extensive. Blue Origin and the other companies here provide the FAA with comprehensive data about our systems and processes to ensure the safety of the uninvolved public and property. Our recent experience partnering with the FAA to investigate a mishap on an uncrewed New Shepard flight is an example of the effectiveness of the current regulations. Our flight safety systems worked as designed, and the FAA was able to efficiently verify this due to the insights we have provided through the licensing process. To continue promoting safety and innovation, the FAA needs 3 things. First, the FAA needs a more streamlined process. To keep pace with industry, both the substance and administration of launch regulations should be improved. We encourage Congress to support the FAA's effort to generate guidance, process, tools, and training. This will allow the FAA to use their staff more efficiently without adding unnecessary burdens to operators. Second, the FAA needs sufficient resources to keep up with licensing. Congress and the FAA helped accelerate the development of the commercial spaceflight industry, and now the FAA is struggling to keep pace. Streamlined processes will help, but the FAA needs more funding to deal with the increase in launches. This is a great problem to have. It's why you passed the Commercial Space Launch Act in the first place. Third, the FAA needs time. The learning period is an opportunity for the FAA to gain experience in human spaceflight before it regulates further. The learning period should be extended. The FAA should be encouraged to talk to industry, build consensus, and scale up its licensing capabilities. In the meantime, launch operations such as New Shepard will continue, and this will provide valuable insight to the FAA and the industry. Beyond the FAA, Congress should think broadly about how to build a framework for mission authorization. This should be correctly scoped and draw clear boundaries between agencies. We also recommend Congress designate a single agency as the hub for authorization of commercial space activity. In conclusion, commercial human spaceflight is an American success story in progress. Congress has an opportunity to help write the next chapter and spur continued innovation in the space economy. From launch to the moon and beyond, U.S. leadership is a necessity. To cement our role, we need competitive regulatory environment, one that realizes the potential for commercial investment alongside our civil and national security initiatives.
Interestingly enough, the FAA was not invited to testify. However, the FAA provided CNBC a statement saying, quote, "Keeping pace with industry demand is a priority and it is important for several reasons, including meeting our national security and civil exploration needs. We're working diligently to attract, hire, and retain additional staff."
As we think about regulation in commercial space, top of mind for many is the expiration of the learning period. This is understandable and an issue we need to, and I believe will address. But we need to answer the broader and more definitional questions about what the future of regulation looks like, not just for the next 2 years, but for the next 20.
We also heard the learning period discussed often in this hearing. Executives are urging senators to extend this learning period, which limits the FAA's regulation largely to protecting the public. This learning period is set to expire in January, but these witnesses were adamant the FAA should not add new regulations on flying people to space.
You pointed out that we just started flying commercial astronauts just a couple of years ago. So we're still learning. So the learning period is appropriate, and extending the learning period for the kind of time that we're talking about here is not only going to allow us to develop experience through operations, and improve our safety systems. It's also going to allow new entrants into this industry. We don't want to shut the door behind us because the lead we have is remarkable, and we need to continue that going forward.
In my opinion, too many agencies are involved. It slows technological and scientific advancements, and it puts us at a disadvantage compared to our international competitors and rivals. It is long past time that we create a true one-stop shop for the regulation and licensing of commercial space activities and make the United States the destination of choice for commercial space companies looking to set up shop. I think I can speak for many members of this committee when I say that we were all watching with excitement as Starship made its first test flight at Boca Chica earlier this year. And we look forward to you all proceeding with your next launch and more as you get ready to help put American boots back on the lunar surface. I also greatly appreciated the opportunity recently to visit Starbase in Boca Chica, Texas, over the August recess to see firsthand the incredible work that SpaceX is doing in South Texas. And I don't want to exclude Mr. Joyce here. Van Horn is on my list, and I'm planning to get out and see the great work Blue is doing in West Texas as well. Look, the commercial space industry is at an inflection point. Industry, with some government support, but also leveraging immense amounts of private capital, has brought new, novel technologies into production that hold the potential to do everything from closing the digital divide in broadband internet to making the human race truly multiplanetary.
We also got to hear Senator Ted Cruz ask some questions that I definitely would have had if I was there, including how these delays are impacting HLS and our return to the moon, as well as how even a couple days of a delay can make a major impact on human commercial spaceflight.
Articles in the Washington Post and Ars Technica yesterday discussed how SpaceX has been ready for its second Starship launch for weeks, but is now apparently waiting on the Fish and Wildlife Service, who, just to be crystal clear, they don't launch rockets. But Fish and Wildlife needs to finish its consultation next month. I can't help but be concerned that bureaucratic red tape at AST and Fish and Wildlife and from other agencies have injected themselves into the launch licensing process. All of these agencies have already conducted and approved an environmental review for the first launch of Starship. But since SpaceX is going to keep trying, now the federal government wants to do another entirely duplicative environmental review. Do you think other agencies' involvement is speeding up or slowing down SpaceX's ability to test, launch, and iterate vehicle development?
It's a shame when our hardware is ready to fly and we're not able to go fly because of regulations or re-review. The fact that we can get the launch pad repaired and get it ready to go fly, support a flight, the fact that I can get a vehicle manufactured and ready to go fly, we have 3 or 4 other vehicles also ready to go fly. The pace of our test flight should not be governed by the regulation. We need to be safe, we need to protect the environment, we don't dismiss those, but we need to fly at the fastest pace that we can do hardware development to do this active development process and this test flight experience that we've described.
Well, again, I agree with that. At AST's current speed, what's the earliest HLS will be ready?
It's hard to say. We've got it, we need to fly at the fastest pace. To be fair, we also have huge technical challenges, right? This is a large spacecraft we're building. You got to see it when you went down to Boca. It's an amazing vehicle, but 33 engines, the staging, all this is new technology. We need to test that soon, learn what's wrong, fix it, and go fly again. And we cannot be held up by regulation. So it's hard for me to give a specific date of where we are, but the current pace where regulation is driving, that should not be the case. The burden should be put on us as a private company, put on SpaceX, and let us develop at the fastest pace. We should be the ones that are driving the development, not being driven by regulatory oversight.
Well, and having seen firsthand what you're doing in South Texas, it is extraordinary and very, very impressive. My final question, if you were still at NASA, would this delay be acceptable? Would schedule delays like this be something that makes a NASA program successful?
simply would not be acceptable.
Thank you.
Can you both talk about how just a one-day delay in the mission or the result of a delayed FAA license can set back, missions for months, right? I mean, how does that work for you? And I think, I guess the second part of that, and I'll just ask it and let you guys go, as you look to potentially integrate nuclear propulsion into Starship or New Glenn or future vehicles, can you talk about how the delays in that, the launch or testing of these vehicles jeopardizes future integration of technologies like I mentioned nuclear propulsion in getting us to Mars specifically?
First of all, I would say that, our approach to the way we do development is we have a very aggressive test program where there's no humans on the spacecraft, and we test the spacecraft in an environment to understand how it actually flies and operates. We also do that consistent protecting the public. We want to make sure that no one gets hurt, nothing is damaged except maybe our own facilities, but we use that as a series of test flights. With that approach, it's important we fly as soon as we can. The hardware is really ready to go fly. When we have regulatory delays, such as we're facing right now, that slows down this developmental test flight, and that ultimately slows down our support to NASA and slows down our support to what we need to do to return humans back to the surface of the moon again. So it's critically important that these delays may seem small in the big scheme of things, but a delay, continuous delay of each and every test flight just adds up, and eventually we'll lose our lead, and we will see China land on the moon before we do. And that would be a shame if we did that only because of regulatory burden, and we didn't do it because we were not technically ready to go achieve and innovate.
Yeah, you asked a question about delays in launch. And so for commercial endeavors where private investment is being brought to bear, significant private investment, delays in the process are very expensive. We want to enable industry to move as quickly as possible in a safe way, working with the government agencies that are appropriate, an interagency process, because really it all starts with launch. And getting through those regulations and streamlining these processes is important for this kind of a game-changer technology going forward.